Hello YouTube, today we're going to learn how to count volume by counting cubes. So in a previous video I talked about how, for example, 1 inch cubed, if you've ever seen that unit, 1 inch cubed or 1 cubic inch, right? That's another way people write it. Same thing. These are just synonyms, two ways to say the same thing. Just means that imagine you had like a box that is 1 inch by 1 inch by 1 inch. So 1 inch this way, 1 inch that way. So the floor of the box is 1 by 1, like that. That's the bottom of the box is 1 by 1, and the height is 1 inch tall. And that is what it means to be 1 inches cubed. They're talking about that. So if you had 1 inch cubed and someone had 2 inches cubed, literally it just means they have 2 of these boxes. Okay? So they would have twice as much space as you. They could literally hold twice as much stuff, because whatever you could do in one box, well, they have 2 of them, so they would just do it in their box, and they would do the exact same thing in their other box. They can literally do / hold twice as much stuff as you. 3 inches cubed would mean they have 3 of these. Now, before we dive into counting objects, let's look at like 1 centimeter cubed. So 1 centimeter cubed is very similar, but it just means you have a tinier box like this, and this tinier box is 1 centimeter by 1 centimeter by 1 centimeter. And that's fine. You could measure volume in either way. You could do it by measuring these cubes or these tiny cubes. But you just got to be consistent and clear. You don't want to confuse someone and say, hey, I have 1 centimeter cube. And someone says I have 1 inches cube and think that that means they have the same amount. They don't. The person with the 1 inch cube has much more space. So it's very important that the units that you're talking about are the same, so you know what size of cubes they're counting. So you always want to have inches cubed and compare it to inches cubed. Makes the comparison very easy that way. Okay, so how can we use this when measuring the volume of larger shapes? So let's say you had just, you had like something like this going on. Say we have this. I'm going to do my little trick where I just kind of draw 2 of them next to each other. They almost kind of look like boots here. And then we'll connect them at the edges like that. And we'll create a 3D shape this way. Okay, perfect. So imagine we have this. And let's just say that along the bottom there are 3 cubes like this, something like this, okay? So there's like this. Okay. So imagine that each of these cubes is 1 inch by 1 inch by 1 inch. So if we wanted the volume of this, like what we'll call a boot, the volume of this boot, we're just going to count how many of these we have. So here we have 1, check. I'll change that to red, check. We have another one right next to it, this one, right, all this space, check. We have a third one along the bottom here. So we have 1, 2, 3 along the bottom. So that's 3 inches cubed. And then it looks like we have, probably looks like 2 going up and down. So 1 here and 1 here. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we would say that that boot is 5 inches cubed. And that's really useful because it just means that it has exactly 5 of these in there. And so you know that this boot should be able to hold 5 times as much stuff as this 1 cube could. Or if you filled it with water in here, you'd be able to fill 5 times as much water as you could just one of these things, because literally 5 of them are in there. So that is exactly how we measure volume. We just get like an image or a standard, say 1 inch is cubed, and then we just compare and measure everything using that standard. So what exactly is 1 inches cubed? You can be like, well, it's this. But it's hard to imagine exactly how much that is, but it's just like, it's just 1 by 1 by 1, however much that can hold, that's an inch cubed. And then as long as you count and measure everything else that way, count the cubes and the other objects, you can then compare them. And you can compare 2 completely kind of awkward objects. You know, if we had this another like weird object over here, right? I'm not going to do it, but like we can imagine like counting the cubes that make up this object, and then we can kind of compare who has more space. You know, obviously it needs to be 3D, but I'm not going to draw it all. But that's why it's useful. You can literally just count the number of cubes, and that would measure the volume. All right, stay tuned to the next video where we'll use some formulas to calculate volume as well. And basically, it's a fancy way to count the cubes quickly without just trying to like track each one down. All right, good luck in counting cubes to figure out volume.